Hi, so my name is Dan James Jones. You probably know who I am. If you don't, my name's Dan, and I am going to try out a video for the first time. So this probably won't be very good. It's a bit weird that I'm staring into a camera. The camera's going to be pretty shaky because it's the first one, and we're going to see how it goes. I don't know if you're going to be able to cope with a Welsh accent for 4 minutes. I'm not going to go too long. I just want to introduce myself, say who I am, and say something that really annoyed me today. And I just want to get it out there because I was thinking about writing a blog post about it, but I just thought I can't bother to type. That's all I'm doing at the moment. I really just want to just say it out loud. And so I'm just going to talk about something that's really passionate that I'm really passionate about. And I just want to try and understand in my head and sort of get it out verbally rather than try and type it out, because I'm finding it pretty difficult to do that, and it's a lot of time wasting, and we'll see how this goes anyway. So one of the things that I just really wanted to chat about today was a post that came on to my Facebook, and this is just really to sort of chat through some of the issues that were raised by it. So a good friend of mine put up a post saying that it's a myth that religion is the number one cause of war, and I agree with them from a start. Okay, like something that studying history taught me over 3 years is that it's very unlikely that there's going to be one cause for something. And the fact that it's going to be religion, it probably isn't true. There's usually, if somebody wants something better than somebody else, somebody wants to beat somebody else, and usually, yeah, I agree. Religion probably isn't the number one cause for religion. It is a big problem in the world, I think, and I think that it caused a lot of animosity between people. But yeah, I think something that 4 years of studying has taught me is that you get two different sides. This is basic essay writing. You look at each side of the argument. Do I agree with them? Don't I agree with them? Don't I agree with the other side? And I guess you sort of, you look at one side and you consider their argument, and then and they might say yes, Christianity had a great role to play in this war and in starting this war off. And the other side might say, oh no, it was actually, they really wanted some trade, there was some trade disputes and they wanted this. And I've seen throughout that this is basic stuff I'm talking about now. And it's common sense as well. So yeah, I agree. I don't think religion can be used as an excuse for conflict sometimes. And yeah, perhaps it can be used as an excuse. But there was a deeper thing that I just wanted to really talk about. Not a deeper thing, but there were some issues that were raised up after. So after making my little comment, it was basically that, but in shorter words, more concise, and made a little bit more sense than what I'm doing now, rather than that I usually do. I sort of just fumble on, trying to make sense of my words. After writing something, I had a few responses, and I just want to sort of just really think through these responses that were made by Christians. Okay, so one of the responses were, at the very heart of all wars is sin, which is man's flagrant disobedience to God's law and way of life. Ergo, man's sin is the cause of all wars, not God. And then he says, anyone who thinks otherwise has no understanding of the Bible. Okay, I'm gonna pass over that last sentence. Okay, it's obviously just a little sort of let's have a go at you sort of thing, an ad hominem response. And I'm just gonna leave that and write over it. So what he's saying is, and his wasn't the only response that way. There were some other guys who said, it's sin that's caused this. It's sin that's caused these wars. And yes, you could say that man has caused these problems, but there's if you need to go right back to the beginning. So at one point then in the discussion, I said, sin is irrelevant to the wars that happen and the wars that don't. Okay, and by my reasoning, that is, before time began, Okay, before God had created anything. This, by the way, I don't hold this view. This is a view that these guys are holding. I'm trying to put my Christian head on, trying to understand what they're saying. So, before God ever started making anything, before he made time, before he made space, the Christian believes, or this particular type of Christian believes that God planned out history. So he planned out every single thing that was going to happen in history. He planned out what you were going to eat tomorrow, from the very small things like that, all the way up to he planned when the exact time that World War One would kick off. He decided the exact time that the tsunami would begin, the massive earthquake that caused the tsunami would start. He planned every single thing throughout history. Now the problem comes is that, therefore, in my mind, sin becomes irrelevant because God planned every single sin that a human was going to do as well. He planned that Adam and Eve were going to eat the fruit. He planned that the sins that lead to all these wars were going to take place. And so ultimately, you have to say, and there's no theological thing that you can get out of this. You have to say that God is the progenitor of all wars because he's the progenitor of everything. You know, if you're going to say that God is responsible for the flowers and the plants and for the beautiful sunsets and the rainbows, you also have to say that he is the progenitor, he's the starter, the father of everything else on this planet. You know, he is the one that puts the thought in the man's heart to go and do something terrible. He is the one that... Now, there's a verse that says, but God does not cause man to sin, which causes all sorts of problems, and I don't want to get into now. But it just... I don't understand why these people are sticking up for God and saying, God, it's all our fault that these wars are happening, when in actual fact, God had to plan everything in order for Christ to die for their sins as well. So this same group of people, they usually call Calvinists, they call themselves Calvinists. Whether this is actually what Calvin believed, whether these were actually his 5 points or not, is debatable, and people debate about it everywhere. But they say that Christ died through limited atonement. He died only for those who were going to be saved. So therefore, he died for a limited amount of sin. So he died for every single sin that a human has ever committed, was committing at that moment, and will ever commit in the future. And for God to know that, and for God to know how much sin he had to pay for, God had to know and plan, because they believe God's sovereign, every single sin that he's ever committed. So God knows exactly what's going to happen. He knows that all these wars are going to happen. So I just don't understand. And maybe I'm getting a bit too passionate about this. It doesn't really matter. It's a bit silly. I'm not really that passionate about it. But I'm just really frustrated because people were liking other people's comments and they hadn't even thought about it themselves. You know, if you're going to believe in a God who has made everything, and if you're going to believe in a God who has planned everything, and if you're going to believe in a God who has history in his hands and has planned and has made sure that his plan will happen, then you cannot scapegoat. You cannot say, oh, it's man's fault for the wars and the terrible things that happen on this planet because of sin. But then you're forgetting that God was the one that... The phrase they start using then is use. God has used sin to bring about his glory. Because that's another thing I mentioned as well. Everything that God has done has brought about the best possible result. So the best possible way that God can bring about glory for himself. So this history, so a Christian can't really be a multiverse guy. They can't really believe that because this history is the only history that God has chosen to bring about his full amount of glory. So you have to say that if God had chosen a different path, which he wouldn't because he's perfect, if God had chosen a slightly different path, then he would have got slightly less glory. This is sort of the most efficient way, the most efficient history that God has used in order to bring about the most glory to himself. Because he's that sort of God. He wants all the glory for himself because he deserves it. Anyway, So so my response to you guys is that, if any of you who responded to that video watching this, I just want you to really think about what you believe. And I don't know, I'm fumbling, but like one guy said, I don't understand why God doesn't stop certain things, but I know that he has promised that one day he'll put everything right. The alternative is that this world is some kind of sick joke without consequences, and somebody's liked it, which really infuriated me. I don't know why. It's only one person, but that's just that's just really annoying. I don't understand why God doesn't stop certain things, but I know that He has promised that one day He'll put everything right. Okay, maybe He will, but the fact is, maybe He will put everything right. Maybe we'll get to heaven and we'll be like, oh, that's why you allowed the Holocaust to happen. Oh, that's why you allowed all those people to die in the Rwandan genocide, because it brought about the greatest glory possible for you. And maybe we'll be maybe the Christians will be in heaven worshipping God, saying, well done, you've done a great thing with history because you dealt with man's sin. But don't you see the problem? Or maybe I'm skipping it, or maybe I haven't explained myself very well, but don't you see the problem that you're having? You are forgetting that God had already planned this. God had already planned the Holocaust to happen. God had already planned the Rwandan genocide to happen for His own glory. Everything happens for His glory. And I'm not skewing this. This is scripture. Everything has happened for His glory. And then somebody said, and then the same guy who made fun of me earlier came up with something else then, sort of wrote two comments saying, sin is relevant in every aspect of life. To say it isn't is simply a cop-out. I don't know. What frustrates me the most is Christians who don't, like, this guy is like, he's a lot older than me. And I'm not a special person. I'm not a deep thinker. I'm not somebody who's gone up like to the great universities or has read all the books. But I can't believe there's somebody who's lived all those years and has never sat down and thought, wait a minute, I maybe my theology's slightly wrong here because it doesn't really make sense. And then he says. And then he calls me irrational. He says, to say there are elements of life where sin doesn't apply is totally irrational. So he's called me a couple of other things, but now he's calling me irrational. Which is, you're absolutely fine. You're allowed your opinion. You can think that. But it's not irrational. You're irrational because you try and fit in. You try and say, oh, God is sovereign. God is sovereign and powerful over all. He made everything we see. He has done everything for us, and He has planned history, and He is bringing about everything to His will. But you will get punished, we will get punished as human beings for our sin, for the choices that God has already made that we would do. So all the terrible news stories you hear on the TV, God planned those. God sat down before time began and thought, right, how am I going to bring my glory? I know, I'm going to get women to stay in a basement for 10 years and then I'll let everyone praise me when they're let out. And then people say, and then, people come back and say, oh, it's sin. It's sin. It's sin. Sin has come into the world. God planned sin to come into the world. Don't you get it? And that's the frustrating thing. Okay, you can use the cop-out, God does not force somebody to sin. But then you have to admit that He planned all this to happen. He predestined Christians. If you're a Calvinist, you believe 5 points. Tulip. Total depravity. Humans. I'm going to do another post about this in the future because I'm just rambling on too long. But one of the things you believe is unconditional election. You believe that before time began, God not only planned history out, He also picked the people who are going to be saved in the future. And then you have to believe that He didn't pick the others. Okay, there are some crazy Christians who think, oh, you can say he picked some, but you can't say that the others weren't picked or something like that. I don't know. Double predestination, they say. You can't, but you have to believe in that. You know, you can't say, oh, he picked those, but and then sort of those just the other ones he didn't pick, just just forget about those. He picked some and didn't pick others. You have to believe that. And so, everything. I think I'll just summarize here. Okay. I think that if you're gonna go back to the beginning, if you're gonna go and say that religion is not the number one cause of sin, cause of war, that's fine. You can believe that, and I think you're right. I think you just study history for 3 years, and you'll see that there are countless reasons why wars happen. Just study international relations. That's what I've been doing for the last few years. Just study how, that's if you're a realist, that's how things work. Wars just happen, and they have to happen for states to survive. Okay, it might not have anything to do with religion, and I agree with you. But to then say it's sin that's the ultimate cause of war is absolute rubbish. Because if you're saying that man's sin is out of God's sovereignty, is out of God's control, then you're messing your theology up. You can't hold on the one hand human responsibility, which I was taught growing up. I was taught, yes, you can hold human responsibility on the one hand, and you can hold God's will on the other. And they're like railway tracks that are separated to you they seem separate, but in the distance, far distance, they meet together. And in heaven one day we'll see how man's responsibility and God's will fit together. Now, if you want a cop out, that's a cop out. But God's sovereignty in my head will always override human responsibility. It will always override human will, because God has ordained man to make those sins in order for his full glory to be fulfilled in the future. And in order for Christ's death to fulfill every sin that a Christian has made. And maybe, Paul's, I don't know. But anyway, I hope in this first post I have really tried to try and understand how you can live with yourselves telling people that they're going to go to hell, and that God wants them to be saved, but at the same time hold that God has predestined people to be saved. And technically, I know you say, oh, but you don't know who's been predestined and who isn't. Well, let people let people live their lives out. Yeah, okay, Jesus calls us to go and tell people, and we're like, why, what, okay, you can say, right, well, how does that fit in my theology? Because God has told me, God has predestined everyone, but Jesus told us to go and tell people so they hear the gospel. But if God's already, if God's already predestined somebody, what's the point in going out and trying to find them? Anyway, I'm getting off the topic. I think I've been talking for way too long. But I hope you've enjoyed this first rant. I'm going to do lots more rants in the future, and I need to clarify. I'm not as crazy. My friends will probably beg to differ, but I'm not a crazy atheist. I'm not trying to push my atheist views out there. I'm not trying to push an atheist agenda or an agnostic one. I just want people to think about what they believe and why they believe it. Why, in the comments below, explain to me why you believe, how you believe that God, before time began, was able to plan everything out, but then it's our fault for his plan. So I guess I've summarized it. Okay? That's the summary at the end of the day, is that how are we to blame for God's plan? For God's micromanaging plan that he's decided before time. Why are we to blame for that? Comments below, please, that'd be great. If you want more, just like this video or dislike it. I don't care. I just want people to show that they're watching this, and let me know if you want to see more. Thank you. Bye.